Asim Raba, thank you very much. قبول أخن شينا بشمت خيادتي ولاية أوترايا هالبدان تا شمت شتست خيادتي ولاية أوترايا وشتا بوتا مدينة أوترايا شيكاغو اتلان تمنتا من شلو خنتي تنلخا الداها عودوتا الداها lecture قد بيشا يولتا بيت خاتن يومتا Professor Gabriela Yonan. قم شارخ لخورزن بتمتاخن قاتوخن خش طلبينا من جون سناتور جون يونان اتلخا جون جون نمرود اتلخا خطر خبرانه تاني لخون. I would like and thanks to everybody to attending to this evening's event and welcoming you to this event. I would like to ask Senator John Nimrod to step up to the podium and say a couple of words on behalf of Assyrian Universal Alliance and Assyrian Universal Alliance Foundation and Assyrian American Civic Club of Chicago.
Good evening. It would be kind of difficult for Senator John Yonan to be here, but he was a very close friend, and I'm very appreciative of that. On behalf of the foundation, the AUA Foundation, I just wanted to say a couple of words. How fortunate we are to have a mother and a son performing at the same time. And I think this is the first time that's ever happened among our group. But not only is the son, an Assyrian who's really worked very diligently these recent years to get himself in order, but his mother has learned the Assyrian language, and she's been everywhere where you think that you should have been. She's been in the Kerry Mountains and all the way through. So we're very fortunate to have a German come here and tell us what the Assyrians are all about. But she's very fortunate, and we thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you, John. Before I ask Gabriela Yonan, Professor Gabriela Yonan, come in here and give you the lecture, like John mentioned, we are fortunate that her son, David Yonan, probably maybe most of you know him. He's been a musician from childhood. He likes the music. He played several instruments, but he's really good with violin. And he has been in a lot of Assyrian activities. He attended, he performed. David, like mentioned, he studied music from the childhood, and he's been in the United States studying music. He was in New York at Juilliard and studied music, and then he came here in Chicago, Northwestern University, and he's studying, and also he decided to stay in Chicago. We are hospital, really friendly people in Chicago, so he decided to stay in Chicago and be among us. With that, I would like to ask David to come here and play a piece. And here is David Yonan, please.
Say anything about me, but what I would like to say is I'm going over the years, obviously my father is Assyrian, hence the name Yonan, which is a very Assyrian name. I have over the years done a lot of research on Assyrian music, and since I'm a classically trained musician, I have focused on looking who among the Assyrians of the musicians have done research on the Assyrian songs, and one of them was William Daniel, who was born in 1901 in Tabriz in Iran, and who died in 1988. I believe he died in Chicago. He lived most of his life in Chicago, and he died in San Jose in California. And he wrote extensive collections of songs. And the songs, unfortunately, unlike my mother, I cannot read Assyrians. But the songs are derived from the traditional Assyrian folk songs from the villages back in Iran. And let me find one here which probably outlines mostly. There's one called Lily of the Valley, which I'm looking for right now. And I think that's a very beautiful song. One here called Mother. I think that probably would be a better start. Thank you. And now I would like to give the word to my mother, Gabriela Yonan.
David, it was beautiful. I would like to ask Mr. Homer Assyrian to come to the podium and introduce Professor Gabriela Yonan. Mr. Assyrian.
Welcome everybody. شنتیتون خدمت اخوانات. I'm sorry to start in a few words in Assyrian that might our English-speaking guests might not understand it, but it doesn't matter because it will be very short. شنتیتون كلكم وديو كابولوخ بشينخا اتمجد ان جوزف خبرة مبلغ لمرة خاتند أمتا اتمجد أنا تعنوخون لغ بخلاطة تعنو يوخ عمندي بخته خانم اتمجد براتت أمتلا أبنتي با بجورو أختي أطورايا شليمونيونن اینا جانوزي سابليشانديان رابس بايكتالي أو greatly. Anyhow, Gabriela Yonan, we are proud to have you here with us. Gabriela Yonan went to high school, not to university, in Free University of Berlin. I first didn't know why they call her Free University, but she explained it was in West Germany, so it was Free University anyhow. It was called because, I don't know, because of that. She went to school to study Iranian and the Semitic history and languages. She started her schooling, in university schooling, in 1970s. She was studying there under one of the biggest Semitic languages professor in the world. He was a friend of me. We worked together in Tehran, but later he was transferred to Free University. I believe it was in 65, 66 or something like that. And she went to school under him, and she studied under him. And she's very proud of Professor Rudolf Matsuch. Yes, one of the biggest professors in the world. Anyhow, Gabriela found a special interest not only in Assyrian and Aramaic studies, but in the history of the Assyrians. And for our privilege, it is about the Assyrians of today, about modern Assyrian, not old Assyrian. And beside that, she has worked and she has written a lot and spoken a lot about the Assyrian, modern Assyrian politics and policies and whatever it creates our national interests. So she wrote a book, her first book, that is translated in English. It says Assyrians of Today. She published this. It is the first book ever written by one of non-Assyrians about the Assyrians of modern, the Assyrian national movement of today. And her second book was the Assyrian journalism, the history of Assyrian journalism, both of them in German. And both of these books, and the third one that I will tell you about, is a treasure of ours in the Ashurbanipal library that we have here in the AUA Foundation. The third one is the Assyrian genocide. It's about the Assyrian genocide. It's a wonderful book. And Gabriela, when she was in Germany, she was studying in Germany and she married Shlimon Yonan. She was one of the co-founders of the Assyrian Union of Berlin. That was the first Assyrian organizations in Germany and maybe in Europe. And then at that time, she was a co-editor of the first Assyrian journal written or published in Germany and in Europe. It was called Igartu. Igartu means epistle. It's greater than a letter. But I don't know if that magazine is still, no, it's stopped publishing anyhow. Since 1970, she worked with the German government about the refugees and asylum seekers that were applying for the asylum in Germany. And she was the first person that made the Assyrians known to the world and known to the German government that they are different from other asylum seekers, and they are a separate nation, and they are a Christian, and the old Assyrian nations from that origin. But now it is an honor for me to call Gabriela Yonan to the podium, please.
Union of and AOAF, the foundation. I was thinking maybe I have to explain to the few guests who are non-Assyrians that the first speaker who addressed to you on Aramaic, on modern Aramaic, that means modern Assyrian language, that this is one of the oldest language in the world. And over the, not only centuries, but millenniums, from the old Aramaic to the Christianized Syriac language, it is still existing, and it is spoken about by 1 million speakers, which are all Assyrians, and they are, for special historical reason, scattered all over the world. And this will be a part of my speech today. Yeah, maybe this is better. The title of my speech has in the beginning some catchphrases. It says Mesopotamia or Kurdistan. Today, when we read every day in the newspapers about Iraq, I don't know if it is, if many people are aware that the Iraq, as we see it today, is a very young state which has no longer history as a state, as a political state, than about 80 years. But Mesopotamia, this is a landscape which we even find mentioned in the Old Testament. It has a history of about 5,000, 6,000 years. And Mesopotamia was the name until about 1928. There was no state Iraq. The state Iraq, as an independent Arabic state, was founded in 1932. And what was the geographical boundaries of Mesopotamia? Mesopotamia means the meaning of Mesopotamia is the land between two rivers. And this is in Aramaic Bet Nahrain. Nahrain means two rivers. Okay. This is just the Greek translation. Mesos means between, and Potamos is the river. Kurdistan is a very much younger part in the northern part, which is the mountainous part, and it is inhabited by Kurds, but not only by Kurds, but by many other people, while Mesopotamia and its ancient population is the place where the Assyrians, from the beginning till 1915, lived in a compact population group. The upper Mesopotamia is going to the Taurus, and southern Mesopotamia is going very southern, where the Babylonian Empire was created. And the eastern border is the mountainous chain of Iran, while a western is going until the Tur Abdin. And we have to imagine the Assyrian settlement of the modern Assyrians, where until 1915, until the when the genocide started in the First World War, was like a triangle in Upper Mesopotamia. I think it is very important to understand why the Iraq today has such a lot of problems. If we don't understand how it came to the creation of this state, then we will not understand why the problems are today. My subtitle is that I want to speak about genocide and the Assyrian questions in post-war negotiation by the League of Nations. Just let us see to explain these three things. When I speak about genocide and First World War, then immediately those people who are a little bit familiar with history, they are connecting it to the Armenian genocide. But as a historian, I spoke many times in front of some European parliaments, my last time in Vienna, because now there is a strong movement among the Assyrian communities in the diaspora that they are seeking recognition for the Assyrian genocide. There was no such thing like an just Armenian genocide. In 1914 to 15, the jihad was declared by the Turkish government and by the Turkish Islamic leaders. And jihad was not just meaning Armenian Christians, but jihad was declared against all Christian population in the Ottoman Empire. As you maybe know, Ottoman Empire was a huge empire built in the 16th centuries, and it was existing until 1918. It was the destruction was in the First World War, and within the Ottoman Empire, huge population of Christians were living. Greeks, Armenians and Assyrians. You must think that was about a group of about 5 million. When the war was over, 1.5 million of the Armenian and Assyrian Christians were killed by massacres and by extinction, and 2.5 million of Greeks were partly driven out of the Turkey, and other parts have been also fell also victim to the massacres. So this is what I understand, and what now in the academic history is accepted, that there was not only an Armenian genocide but a Christian genocide based on jihad, on the holy war. What do we understand about the Assyrian question? Of course, the Assyrians in that time, most of them lived in the mountain area of Upper Mesopotamia. Upper Mesopotamia was in that time divided. It was all under Ottoman rule. There was that was what is today Iraq. That were 3 provinces, Ottoman provinces: the province of Mosul, province of Baghdad, and the province of Basra. And it is very interesting, if you remember in 2003 when our American troops came to make a regime change, which was a plan which has had the reason that there was a dictatorship, authoritarian government under Saddam Hussein. Now we have the problem that this state, which was a very short time existing, because 80 years in history is not a very long period of time. So now we have the problem of 3 provinces: the northern, which is mainly populated by Kurds, Turkmens, and Assyrian Christians, and then the Sunni Arab, which is the Baghdad province, and in the south, the Shia. So we have now the same situation as it has been in the Ottoman Empire. And it is very difficult to find a new way to bring together these three provinces which came out. The Assyrian question was directly connected to the genocide. The genocide of the Assyrians started in the summer 1915. In Upper Mesopotamia, in the area of Hakkari, which is a very high mountainous area. The first, what happened was that the tribal Assyrians, the Hakkari, the mountain Assyrians, were pressed by the Ottoman troops and the Kurdish nomads helping the tribes. They drove them out. So after several months of being in a struggle with the Ottoman troops, there was no other way than a mass exodus over the border going to northwestern of Persia. Persia in that time, since about 1907, was under the influence of Russia. Persia was a neutral country, but was very weak, so that in 1907 there was a treaty between Russia and England and Great Britain. So Iran was divided in two spheres: the sphere of the north, where the Russian was then occupying, and of the south, where the British had their troops. And only in the middle there was a neutral corridor, and that was how the Germans then tried to penetrate Iran, which was not very successful during the First World War. So this group of about 80,000 Assyrians from the mountains came down to the plain of Urmia. Urmia was the center of the plain Assyrians, the Assyrians who lived in the plain. And for more than 3 years, the mountain Assyrians tried to keep on and to make negotiations first with the Russians and later with the British to find a way to become the smallest ally, as it was later said, of the Russians first and then of the English, to become able to be repatriated. But this was not possible. In the contrary, it happened very in the end of the First World War that the Turks were able to initiate a mass destruction, and a very huge group of Assyrians were fleeing under a protection, but protection would not be the right word because it was a very small military group of English who helped them to escape. And one can say half of the people, or at least half of the people, were victim of the massacre. So the rest of these Assyrians from Urmia and from Hakkari, had to walk with children and old people and animals in a big mass exodus, first to Hamadan and later from Hamadan, by help of English military, they were brought to Mesopotamia, which was then, in the end of the war, occupied by the English military. What happened was that those Assyrian refugees were settled in a tent city, which became even very prominent in the media of America and Europe, and many visitors came to see that tent visit with 5,000 tents where Assyrians and also a smaller part of Armenians were settled, and waited how they can go back in their in their old to former settlements. And then this was then when the Assyrian question started. The Assyrian question was more or less how to become autonomous under a Christian grand power. The two grand powers who were left after the World War I were England and France. And Russia, who was originally one of the allies and one who wanted to be participating on the partition of the Ottoman Empire, was out of the game because of the Russian Revolution. So there were only two grand powers left to deal with was once the Ottoman Empire. Even in 1915, there was a secret treaties between these two grand powers how would be the partition of the Ottoman Empire. They were sure that in the end, England, Russian, and French would win the war, and this secret treaty was the Sykes-Picot Treaty, and it was interestingly because it has to do also because today we have a very similar situation in Iraq. Originally, the first the part of Syria and northern of what became Iraq the idea was that France should have this part, while England wanted the southern part of Iraq, what means in that southern Mesopotamia, because that was their interest was to fix the way to their Indian empire. That the English empire included Indian in that time. But after the war, 1920, one of the first negotiations was that they made an exchange. So then England became the north, where the oil is, and which is also a very important thing, and French became Syria. So England was able to have the control over the whole Mesopotamia. And in that part, the Assyrian refugees were waiting that England should help them to resettle, to becoming repatriated in their old places. The first step of the Assyrian question, which of course was only connected to England because the Great Britain was looking to use the Assyrians for their own interest. I mean, policy is always today the same, and I guess in the ancient time it was also so. Nobody is just doing things for goodwill, but it has always to be connected to interests. The first war to settle the situation, how to bring the war negotiation to an end, was the Peace Conference of Paris. For those who are not so familiar, on the 30th of October 1918, the first war was over, and Turkey surrendered and threw back their troops from Mesopotamia, which was once a part of Ottoman Empire, so English occupied it. Syria, all this, Syria, Palestine, Iraq, Mesopotamia, that was provinces of Ottoman Empire. So if we look today on the Middle Eastern states, like the problem Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, this all belonged until 1918 under the Ottoman Turkish rule. And all these groups and more groups like the Kurds, the Armenians, the Assyrians were looking for freedom and autonomy. There was very at the end of the First World War, America stepped on the scene. And the American president, Woodrow Wilson, started 1918, it was in February 1918, to proclaim the 14th Articles. 14th Articles which urged the Grand Powers to give all the peoples who now are free of the yoke of the pressure of Ottoman Empire, that they now serve their freedom, their independence, their self-determination. And that was, we can say, America at that time played a moral, very important role to like control. It was also America who, 1918, suggested to found the League of Nations. League of Nations is the first, and after the Second World War, it came out of the League of Nations, the United Nations. So it is just a follower organization, but League of Nations was the first, and the idea to bring all these different peoples and powers together was an American idea. And in this big game, in this mosaic, what was then coming out of that war, the Assyrians, of course, was a very, very small thing, and it wouldn't have, I mean, nobody in that time knew who were the Assyrians. But because of the English interests, Assyrian question came on the agenda of the international conferences of the League of Nations. And first, in 1919, the Paris Peace Conference were called together. And interestingly, in this conference, the Assyrian, can I have some water? The Assyrian played a very interesting part. It was granted in the first treaty, which was then signed in Sèvres, but was never ratified, that the Kurds should have their autonomy, and in Article 62, the Assyrians were granted security and religious and cultural security. For Armenians, it was also granted that they should have an independent state, which was then later never came to reality. Among the Assyrians, it was not so that the Assyrians just was sitting in their tent city of refugees and waiting that and praying and waiting that something happened for them. No, they organized themselves, and just a moment. The Assyrians, had made a committee. And interestingly, in Paris, when this came to the conference of peace conference, 6 delegations were present. They were not accepted because the English said, "Don't worry." It was Lord Curzon, who was the foreign minister of foreign affairs, Secretary of State of Affairs, but. Lord Curzon did not allow them to be present, but 6 different memorandum and notes were sent to the Secretariat of the League of Nations. And it is so important that these documents are existing. Otherwise, how can you prove that you were from the beginning be interested in having the autonomy? And so it was very clear, and all this 6 years of negotiations where the Assyrians of different groups were active, they are today in 2003, as I remember, and today we have the same situation that the Assyrians are asking for a certain place for autonomy in the new Iraq, and they go back to their claims which they brought before the conferences in the post-war negotiation. So past and present are connected together. For the Assyrians who are of course, familiar a little bit with their history, I only want to mention two important personalities who both tried in each different way to bring the Assyrian issue on the agenda. The one was Surmad bit Marshimun, who was in that time the representative of this group of Assyrians who mostly belonged to the mountain Assyrians and to the Church of the East under the Patriarch Marshimon. But Marshimon, the strong leader Marshimon Benjamin, unfortunately was one of the victims of the massacres. He was falling victim in March 1918 by murder of one of the Kurdish leaders, Simko, from the Shekak tribe, so that it was very difficult. They were more or less, this group were more or less without leader, because the brother who took over was a very sick person in that time, and he was very young, only 26 years old. This was Marshimon Polos. So the whole responsibility was on the shoulder of one brother, that was the General David, and his sister Solma Khanom, which was a lady of about 35 years. She was educated with the English missionaries, and she was able to negotiate in the English language. She tried everything to get to Paris, and the English. Yes, I must say, from my point of view, she did her, yes, because she promised that she will be in Paris, and it took her months that she then could get their papers ready from Mesopotamia. But when she came to London, she was stopped by some pretexts, and she never made it to Paris. But there were several other delegations, and the second, which was also a very important person, but he did not be at the Paris conference. This was Arapetrus. Though we don't have very much time to speak about Arapetrus here, and I know that several Assyrian groups are looking at him as a controversial person. In my researches, I found a lot of documents that I think Arapetrus was one of the very smart and politicians, and he did a lot of different things. He was, even before the war, in negotiation with the Russians. He tried with the English. He found out very early that the English will not be helpful for the Assyrians, and then he was negotiating with the French, and and later he made it in Lausanne to the conference. Anyhow, these two groups and some others, but unfortunately, but very normal in every society and among every groups, these two groups did not work together, but against each other. And if you have a very big people, it doesn't matter if there are many divisions, but if you are such a small people, divisions are more dangerous, because you have not much competent people, and if they work against each other, this makes things very difficult. So Surma did not go to Paris, but the different groups, but one of that groups, the most important group who was there fighting or struggling for their rights, was the group who came from America. And this group was, I can say, that what the national movement, which is a movement of union, in that group, in this organization, who was under the leadership of Joel, help me, Joel, Warda, yeah, of course, of Joel Warda, but there were Jacobites, Western Assyrians from the Jacobite Church, from the East Church of the East, from Protestant. They include the bishop of the Jacobite Church, and they introduced, I think, the most intelligent claim and petition. But the Paris Conference went over, several treaties was never ratified, and it came the next step. The next step was Lausanne. The Lausanne Conference is very famous because there, more or less, all the things for the Middle East were settled except the Mosul question. But I have to go back a little bit. This refugee city, which I mentioned in Bakuba, was closed in 1920, and the people didn't want to wait more years. It is very difficult to live in camps. It was a tent camp. So the English promised them that there will be a buffer state because the English wanted to shift their territory of influence very northern as much as they could. And at the same time, it's interesting for me as a German, we were fighting together with the Turks. The Turks were our allies, the German allies. While the Germans went very down, had to pay a lot of reparation, the Turks, like phoenix from the ash, very soon, in the next 3 years, came up, became very strong, and were then negotiating with the English in the same level, while the Germans lost a lot of things and were not very able to bring any of their claims then to reality. So while that was while Arapetos from the beginning, that means from 1918 to 1919, said, when time is going by, 1 year, 2 years, then the time frame, the window of time is closed for us. And he was right. There was only the chance between 1918, in the end 1918, to 1920. And when it came to Lausanne, the chance was over for the Assyrians to get an autonomy. But there were several steps which, when the Assyrians, the first step was that the English provided a troop of Assyrian, a military group, under leadership of several maliks, of several military leaders, including of Arapetos, to repatriate them by themselves, because in that time there was not yet a border between Turkey and Mesopotamia. It was in negotiation. So it could have happened, but this expedition, it was something like a military expedition. It was not stopped by Turkish troops because in 1920 there were not Turkish troops. They were busy with their national pact and with their conferences in Sivas and Erzurum. So if it would not have failed by own struggles against each other, it could have maybe been successful. But it failed, and when Arapetos came back with the rest of his troop, he was exiled by the English, because the English feel that Arapetos is a danger for their own interest. And the second thing was, in 1922-23, about 8,000 Assyrians infiltrated, secretly, in the same way, but not as a military troop, infiltrated this area to slowly go back to their old settlements. Interestingly, there came now the question of border, of bringing back Assyrians and then making the border. And that was the crucial conference of this was not Lausanne, but it was the Conference of Constantinople, 1924, which is very unknown. And it was no more Lord Curzon, but Percy Cox, who was then representing Great Britain. And I believe it was, not Ismet Pasha, Fatih Bey, who was representing the Turks. And it was the Assyrian question, that means repatriation of the Assyrians, but under British protection. That was what the Assyrian wanted. That means it was in the English interest to say we wanted to settle the Assyrians back to their homelands in Hekkari, and all this area should be under our protection. Of course, the Turks didn't want this. What Fatih Bey suggested, okay, they can live, we will protect them, let them come back. But at the same time, in 1924, just during there were negotiations about how can be a resettlement of the Assyrians. At the same time, Turkish army made a raid and chased back all that 8,000 Assyrians who were trying to go back to their country. When this happened, Great Britain protested to the League of Nations, which was more or less their own. They had, like today, we have 5 veto powers in the United Nations. So Great Britain and French were the one who were ruling the League of Nations. But and when this did not help, they asked. There was an international court, and this was in Den Haag, The Hague. So they called The Hague because Turkey was not entitled to do any military action because in Lausanne Treaty, because of not the Mosul question was not yet solved, so the status quo should not be changed. But the Turks used military power to do it, and they were successful with it. Finally, the situation was that the Assyrians could not go to their countries, to their old countries, and it came, a commission was sent to find out, and this is the same thing which is now next year will be done in Kirkuk, to see the census, the population, to make an account, and what is it, a caucus or something, to see if there are enough Assyrians, so then this can be included and should not be Turkish. And in that time, all this northern province of Mosul, there was no many Arabs. The majority were Kurdish, and the third after Arabs were the Assyrians in that area. So a group of 3 people, a commission, the so-called, a commission was sent, 1 Swedish, 1 Hungarian, and 1 Belgian, and came back and gave the report to the League of Nations. And in the next year, when the Mosul question came on the agenda, again it was tried to bring the border very northern to include the Assyrians, so that this would be out of Turkey. But then a general was sent there with some helpers, Leidener, and this was the Brüsseler Commission. Interestingly, in that time, Turkey was so strong that they refused him to make some investigations. So Leidener gave his report in 1924. And just a minute. And the whole question ended up with a compromise. The English, the Great Britain, were able to shift the border a little bit northern, which is even today now the border of Iraq. That means of that what was Mesopotamian and what is now claimed to be Kurdistan, but not further enough that all these area was included, which would be then the home, the autonomy home of the Assyrians. So this is the second part of my subtitle. Today, when the Kurds, mainly in this part of the Barzani Kurds, recently I found that there was a document that they claimed Assyrians are not the autochthone people of that area and they should just go and have some religious protection. Then there were a lot of protests by the Assyrians today. I mean, this was just some weeks ago. It is very important to remind the Kurds that even the border, which is today the border to Turkey, was shifted more northern because of the Assyrian question. And this is even something which the Assyrians should be aware and should throw in their discussion, because today the Assyrians are have claims that they again want to have an autonomy, a special part in the Nineveh plain, that they could have their own autonomy, at least not a state but an autonomy. So I wanted to bring this historical facts before you, to connect them with the situation we have today in Iraq, and that Iraq is a very young thing, and I am not convinced that it maybe in another 100 years there will not be more just a state Iraq, from the old time when the empire, the old Assyrian Empire fell down, that didn't mean that the people die out. I think there is any people in this area that has such a lot of so big right to be there and to have their rights of autonomy than the Assyrians. By the way, in the first memorandum, what was written by Marshimon Pole, he made it a point that it is important and that they wish to live under British protection, but in good neighborhood with the Kurds. So Assyrians are aware of the fact that they have to arrange their relationships with the Kurds who are there and who are the majority. And so it is not to say that one people should be there and the other should not be there, but it is a still difficult question, and I, coming to an end, hope very much that the past, and especially the Assyrian question, which is now again has a re-edition, is coming up again on the agenda. They should strongly look in their past, which is not long. It's not 80 years are nothing in history. It is very important that the Assyrians take this history, facts of history, and bring it in, so that we come in the future to good results, so that the Assyrian, after the last decades being under pressure of assimilation and Arabization, that they can become again, aware of their own culture and have the freedom to develop their culture, their religion, and their political freedom. And I am very against it and make it a point here. Assyrians are not just a religious minority, because this was in Ottoman Empire. We have no more the millets as the Turks and the Arabs want, and even the Kurds want to give. They speak always about the Christians and the Kurds. No, there is not something like, we are now living in a time where people have a name, not only a religion. And the Assyrians are Christians, but in the first part they are Assyrians, Christian Assyrians. So I hope that your people, the Assyrians, will work on this issue, not fight, but work on this issue, and that the diaspora, who is very important, mainly the diaspora in America, and that they are going on to work, that the Assyrians in Mesopotamia can regain their freedom and their independence in a way which is possible today in the modern Iraq. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. We're going to open up for the questions. If anybody has a questions for, they can more than welcome to ask it. And نطلقهم بقارب رابع خدوتا Dr. Gabriel جواب البقارو.
Gabriela, you said Kurdistan. There isn't a place in Iraq named Kurdistan. There is north of Iraq. But Kurdistan come this name, as I know, at 1965-70.
No, there was more or less. It's only today that if there is, as I told you, my speech was that Kurdistan was a kind of a landscape inside of Upper Mesopotamia. Kurdistan, because there are living Kurds, there was never an entity, a political entity. We had an Assyrian Empire, and then we had the Ottoman Empire. And when the Ottoman Empire was finished in 1918, the English created all that states, Iraq, Syria, and even Lebanon by France, which are artificial areas. For example, Iraq included parts which not by natural ways were there. Therefore, there was a problem. I mean, of course, the Kurds call their area Kurdistan, but a state, even today, they speak about a provisional government, Kurdish regional government. But until today, it's not. I mean, the game of the Kurds, I know the game of the Kurds. They say, of course, if there will be an Iraq, we will be an integral part. But beside, they have made all things ready that this will never happen, and that there will be a Kurdistan. I mean, a Kurdish state, a political. Until now, officially, there is not. Officially, they say we will be a federal part, but unofficially, they are still making business about the oil and about Kirkuk and all this. So, of course, there is not such thing like a Kurdish state, but it is the goal of it. This is the problem. And the Assyrians are too weak to... I mean, one thing is clear, that there will never be again in the next decades or maybe century an Arab rule over that part, which is Upper Mesopotamia and includes the part where the Kurdish have the majority. But yes, good that you make it. So maybe I was not making it so clear in the beginning. Thank you.
Just a short note, just before I start my question, I had a chance and a privilege to meet Mrs. Yonan when she first came into the door, and I was very happy to meet her. She said, "Ila raba karta u raba telga." It was very nice. I just want to answer you that when Ms. Yonan is giving out a lecture, we will be there. Let it snow fire. However, my question is, as it's all definitely known how much that Turkey was an ally of Germany during the period that you were just talking about, more than pretty much like the core of your lecture. Did the German government or Germany in general make any efforts to stop this massacre against the Christians of the Ottoman Empire, if not on the political scale, at least on a humanitarian one? And if they did not, then why?
Yeah, very good question. Because one of my chapter in the in the book Forgotten Holocaust, which is the genocide book Homer mentioned, there is a chapter, it is called Holy War Made in Germany. The problem was that the Germans who wanted the Turks to become in, it was the German it was a special group in Germany connected to the government who suggested to the Turks, which were not the Osman Turk, it was a young Turk. You know that 1908 there was the young Turkish revolution, and then three men came to power: Talat, Jamal, and who was the third? And Enver, the later war minister. These three the young Turks were a secular group. So they would normally not declare holy war. They would join or not join a war, like with the Russians, Balkan War. They were not declaring holy war in the Balkan War, 1912, 1913, and also not in the Russian War. They never did declare holy war, though the other part was Christian, because they were not religious. In the main mill, people was religious, but this government was not religious. So it was indeed Germany who suggested by a memorandum, and they had a reason. They said, "Look, if you, the Turks, declare holy war, then it might happen that the English and the English Empire included a lot of Muslim population in India." And the French in North Africa. And the idea of the Germans war, holy war, made maybe possible that these peoples raised against English and French. Then 1915, when the declaration, when 1914 in November, holy war was made, even the leaflets in Arabic and Turks were printed in Berlin. I wrote a letter of it. It's incredible. Yes, it's incredible. And you remember that the Deutsche Kaiser, the Imperator, the German Imperator Wilhelm II, he visited twice the Osman Sultan. One was in 1889, and the second one in 1893 or so. And he was proclaiming, even in that time, when he was in Damascus, he raised the glass, I don't know, maybe not with wine, but with something, and said, "I am drinking and I am congratulating for the 300 millions of Muslims." And a rumor after that spread that the German Kaiser became a Muslim, which of course was not so. So it's really that the Germans initiated by suggestion the holy war, and then there was a discussion in Germany between academics, German professors, and also a lot of church people. And there was one outside from Netherlands, Snuko Gronje. He was a famous professor, and he said to the Germans, "If you are inciting in holy war, do you know what will happen? It will be for the inside Christians. The Osman will slaughter the Christians like the Armenians, the Greeks." So, and then the one who was leading this movement was a Professor Becker, who later became a cultus minister in the Weimar Republic. He answered, "Yes, that might be so, but a war is not a sport, and we have to take that risk." So the Germans are morally very responsible for the killing of the Christians. They did not do it. Though they were, as you know, maybe we had 800 officers, German officers, to reorganize the Turkish army. And all the many important generals, they got then the title Pasha, like von der Goltz Pasha, for example, Mesopotamian, the 6th army of who conquered in Mesopotamia 1915, 1916. That was von der Goltz Pasha. And there were a lot of maybe 20 or 30 very important generals. And only von der Goltz, when the Turks even tried the Germans to involve in the massacres, he sent a telegram to the Foreign Office of Germany, and he said, if in my area are massacres, I immediately will leave my post. That was the only German general who at least, he didn't say stop it at all, but he said, stop it in my area. And the area about he was speaking, well, I have that original document and I published it. The area was the Tur Abdin. It was near Mardin, where the Jacobite Assyrian Christians were. And because of this intervention of von der Goltz in that area, Turkish government, Enver Pasha, stopped it. But this was the only situation that a German general intervened. And Germany has a very heavy responsibility for this. Therefore, the Assyrians in Germany and in Europe are using this argument and are saying you have the duty to recognize our genocide because you are yourself involved in it. Okay.
Does anybody has any question?
Yeah, good evening, Doctor. Well, first, my name is Angel Kindo, and we would like to thank this general who stopped the massacre. At least he saved some Assyrians, you know. My question is, there are a lot of rumors and maybe facts that there is a support by Jewish to the Kurdish in North Iraq. I don't know if you are aware. I would like to know your comments on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope I understood your question well. I have to, I know that very well, and I was just today reading an article about this. As you maybe know, or in case you don't know, I will tell it to you. In Upper Mesopotamia, beside the Christian Assyrians who lived there since thousands of years, also a group of Aramaic, like your language, speaking Jewish were there. Probably at least they have that identity that they belong to this Jewish population who was deported in 722 BC by the ancient Assyrian. When there was an invasion, Assyrian deported Jewish population from Judea and Samaria to Assyrian, to Nineveh. A second wave was in 587 BC, but this was from the Babylonian, that are Jews who came to Baghdad. And now I come back to the modern times, because when Kyros the Great was then conquering the old Babylonian empire, he released the Jews. He said, you can go home now. We give you now all your holy things, and you can build your temple in Jerusalem. But it's like if, for example, America would say to the Assyrians, you can go home now. Iraq, Mesopotamia is free, it's yours. Then it wouldn't mean that everybody goes. There would be, of course, a lot of people who would say, yes, but now I am so used in my family and I am here for many generations. So it was that a lot of Jews, thousands of Jews, did not go. This were the ancestors of the Jews in the north. The northern part, the Jews which are calling themselves, by the way, sometimes Jews of Assyria, because they are settled in the area of Zakko and even of Nineveh. But in general, most of them calling themselves today Kurdish Jews. In 1951, after 3 years after Israel was founded, most of these Jews, the Kurdish Jews, went to Israel. But not all. There was no reason. The rest went then in the 60s and 70s from the area of Zakho, from very further. But because of this Jews, of course, were bilingual, like Assyrians mostly are bilingual. In any place they are living, they speak their home language, and beside, nobody would know when, like Homer, for example, coming from Iran, when he speaks Persian, I think any Persian or Iranian will know you are Assyrian, except you tell him. They will not know it because you are bilingual. So with the Kurdish Jews, the same thing. And it is true that in the 60s, even in the, when the first riots against the Iraq state and against Arab Iraqs came out, it was Israel who provided the Kurds with military equipment. So we can say that the political relations between Israel and the Kurds of today, they have a long tradition. They are more or less historical. And the area, and the Jews lived in an area, especially of Barzan. So therefore, there was a sheikh of Barzan, but there was a Jewish sheikh and there was a Kurdish sheikh. But it is not true that Barzani, Mas'ud, or even the old Barzani is a Jew. This is just a rumor. I know that there is a rumor. But there is an alliance more or less between Israel politically and the Kurds of today, and America is supporting that, as far as I know.
In France, the session meeting held between British and Turks and some of the Assyrians there in Iraq to rebuild the new map of the Iraq. So we understood from the history that the land that we left in Hakkari, when they pushed us to the south of Turkey, which to the mountain down, the Turks accepted, after the truce or armistice happened, they agreed to the inhabitant of Hakkari will leave their lands and they have no right to ask them, and that's why the new border of New Iraq happened as it is now. So the people there at that time, inhabitant, was Assyrian, Jewish, and Armenian, and Turkmen. The United Nations gave the settlement for Jewish in Israel. And the Armenian got their rights in Armenia. Who lived there? We. Can we ask our land now, after this Kurdistan regime that they called in the new constitution, do we have the right to go to our land? Or we stay as it is, as we are now, taken care by the Christian, they said Christian, or Assyrian, or minorities in the north, while the regime now there in the constitution is Kurdistan. Where we will be now? Everyone got his rights. We have no rights.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, the problem is that an independent Armenian state was in that time only in the part of, it was only between 1918 and 1921, and then Soviet Union came, and then until 1994, it was under Soviet Union, under the Bolshevik, under the communist. So there was not such thing. The idea of an independent Armenia, which includes the 6 provinces, the so-called Armenian provinces, which partly would be also you include, that was from the table even only in Paris, as I said, 1919, as you said. The Israel, that was much later, that was, Zionism started early, but it was then only after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, and until now, the question of Israel is not really settled. It's still always a dangerous thing. When you said, could we go back to our land, even, let's say, there would be a Kurdish state instead of and Iraq would just be the Arab, Sunni and Shia, and then a free Kurdistan, as the Kurds of Barzani and Talabani are wishing, then that would not yet even include the Hakkari region. Hakkari is still under Turkey, and I think that is a difficult thing. Then we can only put our hopes to the PKK. That's the only group now which is trying to fight, and I am not sure what will happen if PKK would conquer. At the moment, it doesn't look like this. But of course, what we can say is it will be interesting. What will happen in the next decade? At the moment, things are open. One thing is clear. This kind of Turkey, what was created by Mustafa Kemal Mustafa, the so-called Ataturk, the father of the Turks, is no more existing, because the Kurds there, which are a lot of people, I don't know, 10 million or so, they are now gaining certain rights. I don't know how to, for us, the problem is Armenians, after the war was over, more or less, they were killed, they were refugees, they went to Syria and Lebanon, and from there to France. And the reason that they have such a strong lobby, even in Europe, is that about 750,000 Armenians are in France. And the same thing is the only hope now for Assyrians in the future is that you have a huge diaspora, for example, in Europe now. Turkish Assyrians, I mean really Turkish Assyrians who are now in the second generation. They have a lot of academics, not only medical doctors and engineers, but so academics which can speak about history and so. And for example, they make pressure. You know that Turkey wants to become a member of European Union. And the Assyrian diaspora has made a lot of pressure and brings, for example, the genocide on the agenda, which was never before happened. So, of course, I'm not a prophet, but I think things are today, the Assyrians have now a better stand than, for example, in that time where they didn't have people to speak up. Before international gremiums. I think today it's not so easy to say Assyrians can't participate. Even in Baghdad, you were there, and you have people now in government, including in that place of Kurdistan or Iraq government. There are now Assyrians present, and this is important.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll take the last question.
Mr. Gabriel, I don't accept what you're talking about before. BC, Assyrian is against Jewish people. Yes, of course, maybe happened by hand weapon. But what do you think, 1945, United States dropped 2 cities in Japan, what do you call them, atomic bomb? Today, Japan and United States very friendly. But Jewish people, they want to steal our history. Alphabet, they call them Hebrew language. Assyrian history, they call them Israeli history, everything. You watch it, the books, you watch it library, you watch it everything, what they do, Jewish people to us. Why are you scared about that, about Jewish people against Assyrian today? Thank you and God bless you.
He was saying that you basically talk about a lot in the past, the BCs, and now the Jewish people are trying to getting a lot of our history, things like that, and saying these belong to us, like alphabet and some other stuff, which I don't know if there is any answer for that or not. That's the Jewish.
Yeah. No, I mean, my speech was connected to the history and not to the Jews. I mean, the only thing what I can say, or what I was finding interesting, that between 2003 and 2006, a lot of articles in the American media was written by Jewish American writers about the Assyrians. And I collected them in my archive, and of course, maybe there was some interest, I don't know. Mostly they were, American, and you are here, so you read that too. for the first time. I didn't see so many stuff written by Jewish American about the Assyrian in Iraq than in this 2 years, about 30, 40 articles. You must find out. You are here in America, but my stuff was connected to history and not to the 1945 situation. Yeah, maybe.
Thank you very much.
I think this gentleman.
Okay, we'll take that as very last.
Yeah.
Recently in Congress, they passed a resolution condemning Turkey for the killing the genocide of the Armenians. Was the Assyrian question part of that? Were they aware of it, or was it just a general vote on that?
Yeah, no, I think since 2002, 2003, here now, as I know, that there is an Assyrian American strong lobby working also on this question, that the Assyrian genocide becomes an issue to the American government, and we have several politicians. She is a parliamentarian, Anna Ishu, for example. It was broad, and as far as I know, Assyrians are trying to bring this issue in. The problem is that the Armenians are not so very helpful. They know the history. They use the same sources like the Assyrians. There's only all the sources for the Armenians are including material for the Assyrians. But it is like the Jews, they did never accept that there were other victims. It took 30 more years that other groups could then bring in that they were also victims of the Holocaust. Same thing is with the Armenians, but there are a lot of recognition in other countries in Europe where are accepted Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks as three populations and victims of genocide. I think it's just a matter of time that this will go forward.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it for your lecture.
Thank you very much for helping.
Now we'll ask, please be seated, we're not done. We'll ask David Yonan to again come to the stage and perform another piece for us. He did a very nice job at the beginning. For those that join us a little bit later, David Yonan is son of the Professor Gabriela Yonan and Mr. Shlomo Yonan. He lives here in Chicago now, and he's going to perform a piece for us.
I would like actually to add also a few things about Assyrian music. I'm an incredibly busy classical musician, and I hardly have the time to keep track of my father's history or of my father's people history. I did try to find as much Assyrian music or traces of Assyrian music, and it is a little bit difficult because Assyrians have not had the classical training or the opportunity to have classical training as much as people who were able to be trained in Europe. Now, this William Daniel, he emigrated from Tabriz to Europe, and actually he took lessons in Switzerland, funny enough, with Adolf Busch, who was the teacher of Yehudi Menuhin, a world-famous classical musician, conductor, humanitarian. And I had the pleasure of working with Lord Menuhin. I played for him first when I was 10 years old, and I competed in his competition in England. And as many of you know, Lord Menuhin was a supporter of bringing people together and a great humanitarian who has influenced many people, such as music director of the Chicago Symphony, Daniel Barenboim, who has also done incredible work in bringing different people together. I believe strongly that music is an ambassador to bring people together, and it's an international language. So the last piece I would like to play, William Daniel wrote down a melody which is considered almost the national anthem of the Assyrians in the diaspora, and it's called Nineveh. And all we know is Nineveh is still a province in Iraq. I think it's a city still. And so let me play as a closing piece Nineveh, and I hope that Assyrians in general find a way of working together and of finding their way and being recognized. Thank you very much.
Bravo, excellent job. At the end, at this, I will appreciate all of you to come here and join us with this event, especially Dr. Gabriela Yonan and Mr. David Yonan to come here and perform for us. Appreciate that. عايبتون رابو باسيمي قتيلو خون شركان بيلو خون أمان تلان هيبي بشركان بتاعيبتون جو أوديات خينك مقر وقت مقاتوخ. Thank you very much. باسيمي.